Welcome to the G5 Hive in our next installment of our Worker Bee series, where we deep dive the G5 college football landscape for the folks that know the teams the best. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review. Today, we'll be heading over to Conference USA to take a look at Sam Houston Bearkats, who are 10-3 in 2024 and capped off their season with a win in the New Orleans Bowl. They wrapped up their 2025 spring practice with their final practice on April 26th. We have a special guest joining us today. He is the sports of SHSU on X. He is a co-host of March to the Pod. He does work for their NIL collective Cat Fund. He is Ben Sorrels. Ben can be found on X at sports of SHSU. Welcome to the show, Ben.
It's quite the introduction. I appreciate it. Ready to talk some football.
I know we're up in our game from last year. We're got to come in strong. I got to be loud for in case when people hear this in the morning that they're paying attention. So that's what we got to do.
Yeah.
For those who are just tuning into the G5 Hive for the first time, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how long you've been covering Sam Houston football?
Yeah, 2021 graduate from Sam Houston, started covering the team and all teams at Sam Houston during my senior year of college, so 2020, 2021. You can find me on at sports of SHSU on X and Instagram, like you said. Cover all sports, including football there. Also a co-host of March to the Pod, which is a podcast on the Republic of Football Network with Dave Campbell's. Texas football, so do work there, and then also one of the board members of our NIL collective at Sam Houston. So stay plugged in, stay involved, and love everything about the Cats.
Well, I want to say congrats first off. I think you're the first 3-time guest. We've had a lot of 2-time guests now that we're into the second series of the Worker Bee, or second season of Worker Bee. But I think you're the first 3-time guest. So congrats.
Yeah, we were talking some NIL stuff. What was that, around wintertime, maybe after the football season?
Yep. We were talking about the NIL revenue sharing, all that good stuff that's still unsettled, I guess.
I know, and I think we have until 6 o'clock today to see if a decision comes down with the House settlement. If not, it's on to wait until next week.
Yeah, I'm not hopeful that anything's going to get done based on what I've seen, but
yeah,
that's a topic for another day.
Yeah, I know that's something else.
And Ben, your award is in the mail. We'll make sure you get it. So
perfect. I look forward to it.
Well, moving over just to Bearkats football, they've hired Phil Longo as their new head coach. Longo had spent the previous 2 seasons as the offensive coordinator at Wisconsin. Prior to Wisconsin, he was actually the OC for the Bearkats from 2014 to 2016. He left Sam Houston to become the offensive coordinator at Ole Miss. He was there in 2017, 2018, and then he went to North Carolina in 2019, was there until 2022 as their offensive coordinator. What can you tell us about Coach Longo and what he brings to the table for the Bearkats?
Yeah, so he's a guy with a history at Sam Houston, was here, like you said, from 2014 to 2016, which is kind of when the explosive Sam Houston offense there in the mid-2010s started. That started 2014 up through about 2019. And he was kind of the orchestrator of that. And he comes from the air raid philosophy that Mike Leach started. So that's kind of his philosophy and what he's known for. He does have some head coaching experience. In the early 2000s, he was the head coach at LaSalle, which at the time, I don't even know if they have a football program now, but they were a non-scholarship FCS team. So does have a little bit of head coaching experience, is known for his high prolific, high scoring offenses, especially when he was at Sam Houston. So really the first head coaching job at this kind of level. So we'll see how it plays out. Everyone knows him as an offensive guy. We'll see how it looks on the defensive side. But yeah, known for his air raid offense, known for how he scores a lot of points. But we'll see how it translates as a head coach and see what it looks like on the defensive side of the ball during his first stint as an FBS head coach.
Well, Ben, as it often happens when you get a new head coach, it means new assistants, new coordinators. Sam Houston's no different in that regard, except for their head coach will also be calling the plays. So you kind of talked a little bit about it here, but can you describe the type of offense that Coach Longo plans to run at Sam Houston? Because in his time at Sam Houston before, like he had kind of a little different style than he has today. So what do you think we see here in 2025?
Yeah, so like I said, the air raid is what he's known for, but he's also known for running the ball as well, which is a little different than what some of the air raid guys have that throw the ball 50 to 60 times a game. So looking back at his time at Sam Houston, 2014, we had Tim Flanders, who was a Walter Payton Award finalist, which is, I think it was the Walter Payton Award, the FCS Player of the Year. And they ran the ball a ton, ran it for 700 more yards than they threw it for. And then in 15, 16, they really aired it out with Jeremiah Briscoe. And you've seen flashes of them running the ball a lot, like at North Carolina. There was one year where they had Carter and Williams, where they both had 1,000 yards rushing. And so he's shown that he's willing to run the ball and he can fit that into a system. And we'll get into that a little bit more with the quarterbacks and how it fits in. And I think another important thing to note is Zach Patterson is his OC. Zach Patterson comes from Wisconsin, where he was an analyst this last year, but he has experience as a play caller at places like Slippery Rock, and he's had success doing it. But he's known for being a running backs coach when he's not been a coordinator. So works a lot with the running backs. And I think it plays into kind of what Sam Houston's looking for this year, which is likely more that approach that they had in 2014, where they ran the ball a lot, or at North Carolina, where they had that two-headed monster at running back and ran the ball a decent amount. So he's an air raid guy. There's been years where he's going to throw it 50, 60 times a game, but he's also willing to run the football, and he's shown he's willing to do that as well.
So I guess with the OC coming over too, I guess I'm just under the assumption Longo's going to call plays. Is that how it's going to start?
Yeah. So he brought this up in his introductory press conference because someone asked about it. So he is going to call plays, he said, for the first season and see how it goes. And then he might hand it off after that to Zach Patterson. But it sounds like Zach is going to work heavily with the offensive guys and scheme and game planning with Coach Longo. But Longo's going to call the plays, at least for this first season. We'll see how it goes after that. It wouldn't surprise me if Zach Patterson ends up calling plays at some point or down the line, just because he has success as an OC, especially at Slippery Rock when he was there. So yeah, for this year, it's Longo for at least 1 year, but it sounds like he's open and willing to hand it off if he needs to.
Well, let's start with the group that leads the Bearcats offense, and that's the quarterbacks. Last year, we were curious if it would be Central Michigan transfer Jace Bauer or Iowa Western Community College transfer Hunter Watson at the helm. Hunter Watson won the job, and he was a real weapon last year, especially with his legs. Looking towards 2025, Jace Bauer has entered the portal and is off to UT Martin. And an interesting name has joined the Bearcats in 2025 as Mabry Matauer follows Phil Longo from Wisconsin. So you have your returning starting quarterback in Hunter Watson. You have another quarterback followed his OC to Sam Houston. Can you help us kind of understand what we should expect for this room heading into 2025?
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got Hunter, like you said, as the incumbent returner, and then you have Mabry coming in as a redshirt freshman. He spent his true freshman season at Wisconsin. I think he only had a few snaps. He was really the third string guy there. It made sense why he didn't play as a true freshman, but he comes over. He's a guy that grew up probably 30, 40 minutes from campus in the Woodlands. So it also makes sense for him to come back. But everything that I know and everything that I've heard, it sounds like this is likely to be Hunter Watson's team. And that's why I alluded to earlier, Phil Longo's willing to run the ball, which is obviously Hunter Watson's style. But to also run a Phil Longo offense, you have to be able to be competent throwing the football. And I think a lot of people had some concerns about how Hunter fits into this offense and how he throws the football. And I get that. But I saw a lot of development last year from Hunter the last 3 weeks of the season. I mean, against Liberty and Georgia Southern, especially those last 2 games, I think we threw it 30 plus times and he looked really good. So I've got some confidence in Hunter that with Longo shaping his offense to fit his skill set a little better than the traditional air raid, and Hunter showing that he can develop maybe a little bit as a passer, that Hunter's likely the guy. But Mabry's going to push him from what I've heard. It's not a done deal. Mabry's more that traditional air raid guy. He almost went to North Carolina and committed there as a junior in high school when Longo was there. And then he went to Wisconsin. So He's been around Longo for a long time. He's Longo's guy. So it's likely Hunter this year, but it's probably going to be Mabry's team for the next 2 to 3 years after that, at least.
For those not familiar with Hunter's game, you talked about it a little bit. How would you describe it?
Yeah, I mean, he is a true kind of dual threat quarterback. I think he had 12 passing touchdowns and 9 rushing touchdowns last year. Has enough with the arm to be able to get it done. But I think his biggest skill set is his legs and his toughness. I mean, he is not afraid to put his head down, which is a good thing, but you also want your quarterback to not get hurt, and that cost him about 2 games last year. So he's a guy that has just enough with his arm to get it done, but his true threat is with his legs and that read option. I think that's where he really excels. So yeah, we'll see what kind of step he can take this year. I think the biggest thing we'll look to see is how big of a step he can take as a passer during the 2025 season.
For those not familiar with Mabry, how would you describe his game?
Yeah, Mabry, big guy. I mean, 6'5", 6'6", probably 220, 230. And he's a gunslinger, great arm. Played at the Woodlands High School, which was about 30, 40 minutes from Huntsville area I grew up in. So I got to see him a lot in high school, and the arm talent it's for real. And there's a reason why he was a top 30, 40, 50 quarterback in the country, depending on the site you were looking at coming out of high school. Had a lot of big offers. So a lot of arm strength, really good body. Like I said, 6'5", 6'6", has a lot of good size. Maybe not the mobility that Hunter has, but you don't necessarily need that in the traditional Longo offense. So yeah, a true gunslinger, and assuming he's not the guy this year, he's almost a lock to be the guy for probably 2 to 3 years after that.
Well, moving on to the running back room, the Bearcats had a very youthful room heading into 2024. Heading into 2025, we may need like first and last names on the back of these jerseys as their room sees top 4 running backs hit the portal. Their leading running back from a year ago, Jay Decker's off to Temple, DJ McKinney's off to New Mexico, John Gentry's off to UT Martin, and Zach Carbeck just recently departed and is committed to Weber State after the spring. That means there are no running backs on this roster in 2025 who took a snap for them in 2024. Ben, what has the staff done to supplement these losses?
Yeah, a lot. And I guess we'll start with, I guess you could call them returners, 2 guys that played in 2023 but did not in 2024, kind of due to injury. So I don't think they'll factor into the rotation, but you have to note Coco Brown, who is just a really big running back. He played a little bit as a true freshman in 2023, and then Adrian Murdaugh as well. He ended up being your starter for about a month in 2023 due to just so many injuries. I don't think they factor into the rotation here, but you still have them. Brought in 5 transfers, and I think that also signals that this team likely wants to try to run the ball as much as possible this year. During the first window over winter break, they brought in Jerrion Parker from Southern Illinois. He's a guy that had just under 400 total scrimmage yards as a true freshman at Southern Illinois, which is pretty impressive considering that is a legitimate FCS conference. And I mean, they played a lot of good opponents. So doing that as a true freshman was pretty impressive. Can do a little bit of everything, running and catching. You also brought in Elijah Green during the winter portal window, and he's probably the most notable name coming over from Indiana, and I think he's the guy that's definitely the favorite to start this year. Had a really big year with Longo in 2022, which was Longo's last year at UNC. Didn't play as much in 2023. Played a decent amount at Indiana last year on a very good Indiana team, had 5 touchdowns and about 250 yards there. So between his 2022 season at UNC and Indiana last year, he proved he could play here. And then you added a couple more during this next window. You got Shane Porter from North Texas, who had about 650 yards and 6 touchdowns at North Texas. Can do a little bit of everything. He can catch the ball as well, so that's an intriguing piece. The biggest, most notable name probably is Alton McCaskill from Arizona State. I think he was, American Conference Freshman of the Year back in 2021, I believe the year was. Hasn't done a lot since, going to Colorado and then Arizona State. So really hasn't played in probably 3 years, but he's likely to factor into the rotation. And then you've got Amarion Gaines-Smith, who is a JUCO running back from Fresno City College, who came in as well, who had some nice numbers there. So you have two returners that have played at this level at a pretty decent level, and then you bring in 5 guys from the portal. I think Elijah Green's probably your lead back from what it looks like right now, but a lot of options there at running back going into this year. A lot of new options too.
Well, with the guys that they did have there in the spring and stayed after the portal, how did this room look in the spring?
Yeah, so Zach Hrbacek was there in the portal. It doesn't sound like he got a lot of reps. That's part of why he went to the portal. And then Jerry and Parker and Elijah Green were the two kind of feature backs in the spring because they were both there. So I think Elijah Green is going to get a lot of reps based on the spring. It sounds like they wanted to bring in a couple more bodies because I think they probably figured out that they want to run the ball a little more. So I think Elijah Green after spring is probably your guy, but they saw that they needed more, especially with Hrbacek going to the portal. So, yeah, we'll see how it shakes out. It's hard to know because you added 3 of those 5 after the spring. But based on the spring, I think Elijah Green is probably the leader in the room right now.
So you talk about, Green being the leader, and they've kind of used some rotation. And Phil Longo's track record as OC leads me to believe that we might have the bell cow back, but I just want to bounce that off of you. His RB1s average 165 attempts, 952 yards, compared to his RB2, which averages 91 attempts and 521 yards. Do you think it's going to be that workhorse back, or you said they want to run the ball, so they need a lot of guys? Is it going to be more of a committee?
Yeah, I think coming out of during spring, it looked like Elijah was probably going to be your bell cow, similar to what a Tim Flanders did in 2014 when he was here. But adding 3 more running backs, and 2 of the 3 I think are really good and have a chance to be really good. I think you see the reps get split up a little bit more, and maybe it looks a little bit more like what he had at North Carolina, where he had 2,000-yard rushers. So I expect Green to still be the guy, but I don't think he's going to be dependent on to play 80-85% of snaps kind of thing. It'll probably be somewhat of a committee. And I think it should be a committee because you've got 3 or 4 guys, in my opinion, that can really play at this level and have shown they can play at this level.
Now let's turn our attention over to this wide receiver room. Their leading wide receiver from a year ago was a converted quarterback in Simeon Evans. He's now off to North Texas. Ife Adeye and Noah Smith have both graduated. That trio had 175 targets a year ago, accounting for 68.3% of the wide receiving targets. Not only will the Bearcats be looking to replace 175 targets, but also 1,140 yards and 7 touchdowns. In 2025, this room is highlighted by the return of Quavez Humphreys and Michael Phoenix II. That duo had 35 receptions, 598 yards, and 7 touchdowns. While Humphreys and Phoenix are both redshirt seniors, 6 of the other 9 guys on this roster are redshirt sophomores or younger, including transfer Caleb Black from Arizona State and Avion Smith-Mack from Long Island. What are the expectations for the wide receiver room heading into 2025?
Yeah, you like you said, you lose your 3 biggest names, maybe, especially with Noah Smith and Ife Adeye, who had been here since 2019. And Simeon Evans came on just extremely strong at the end. So losing kind of 3 of your top 4 receivers, you would think the room would be not in a great spot. But honestly, I think they've got a lot of good pieces there. You start with Quavez Humphreys, who really flashed at times last year, was a little inconsistent. I've heard he was, and that was part of why he didn't play as much at times. His route running, his blocking ability just wasn't as consistent as it should have been. But he's got the physical tools to do it. Had 2 games of around 100 yards, had multi-touchdown games. So he's going to be exciting to be back. Michael Phoenix really came on strong at the end of last year. He was probably our leading receiver the last month of the season alongside Simeon Evans. So really shifty guy with some good size. I mean, you don't see a lot of guys with this size move the way he does. So I'm really excited to see what he looks like in year 2. You could see the growth throughout year 1. It was a little bit of a struggle coming up from the JUCO level, but really developed well throughout the season. So I think there are 2 locks at starter. The other spot, which is kind of the slot, I think it's probably going to be Malik Phillips, who redshirted last year just because there were so many guys in front of him. And it didn't make sense for him to use his senior year and not play. But he had 450 yards and a couple touchdowns in 2023 and was your second leading receiver. So he's probably your slot guy. It'll be good to have him back. He was a big weapon in 2023. A little bit of a different skill set, a little more of a burner, technical route runner than Humphreys and Phoenix. So you got some good skill set there. And then I love even the twos I feel pretty good about. You mentioned some of them. I'll hit on one that you didn't mention first, Lonnie Atkinson. His first 2 years at Sam Houston, not a lot of production, but he has grown a ton as a player. I think he's a guy that could really step up. Was a highly rated recruit out of high school. Caleb Black from Arizona State. He's a local kid from Klein, about an hour away from Huntsville. A lot of speed there. Tim Burns Jr., you bring in from Navarro College, who just had a huge year at the JUCO level, brings in some more speed. So you've got some really good size in guys like Phoenix and Humphreys, and then you've got some good speed with guys like Phillips and Burns and Black. So a little bit of everything in this group, and I think you feel good about probably your top 6, maybe top 7 going into next year, which is a little surprising considering what you lost from last year.
It seems, at least, at North Carolina and Wisconsin and Phil Longo's offense, it was like the slot guy was like the guy. That was the guy that was going to be hyper targeted, if you will.
Yeah.
Did you see that again this spring, or do you think it's going to be more spread out?
Well, I think it is something to watch for, and it shows in the guys they targeted this offseason. So you bring back Malik Phillips, but Caleb Black, Avion Smith-Mack, who you mentioned as well, he fits that same mold. So does Tim Burns. So the guys they targeted this offseason really kind of show that slot position is a priority, and it's something that's going to be important within this offense. We'll see how it fits with Hunter Watson's arm strength and ability to throw the ball. I think that might factor into it a little bit. So maybe they don't throw it to the slot guy as much, but I think it's definitely going to be something to watch for this year, just because the guys they targeted in the portal this offseason.
Was there anyone in the spring that seemed like they had a really good connection with Hunter?
Yeah, so they actually didn't open anything to the media during the spring. So I've gotten tidbits and stuff from people that, like, high school coaches that were at practice and people close to the program. So it's hard to know an exact connection, but yeah, we'll see how it plays out. I think you got to feel pretty good though about your top 6 or 7 in this group going into next year.
All right. Well, the coaching changes, what have you been able to learn, I guess, by word of mouth in terms of how these tight ends will be utilized in the offense?
Yeah, that's really the biggest question coming into this year. I think they're going to be a lot more utilized than they were under a Casey Keeler offense. The tight ends really weren't a big part of what they did, but you bring back Thomas Jewett, who has really started to develop over his first couple of years at Sam Houston. He's a pass catching threat. And then you bring in Rayfield Lawton from Mississippi State. He's huge, like 6'6", 240, really big guy, but he can run really well. And I think those are the 2 guys to really watch for at the tight end position that I think could be involved in the passing game. You also bring back Fernando Garza, who was kind of your 12 personnel tight end when you brought in 2 tight ends. I don't know how much you see of him this year, especially in this offense that's probably going to throw the ball more and look to target the tight ends in the passing game, maybe not just blocking. So I think the 2 names to really watch for, Rayfield Lawton, Thomas Jewett, they can give you a lot. And then if you need to bring in kind of a heavy package, you're looking at bringing in Fernando Garza as well. So that's probably the biggest mystery coming into this offseason, or coming into the summer and season, is how they use the tight ends. But your top 2 in Lawton and Jewett would indicate that they're probably going to be more involved than the tight ends have been the last few years, where it's 20 to 25 targets throughout the entire season kind of thing. So would look for Lawton and Jewett to be the 2 guys to kind of watch out for.
Well, the Bearcats will be without center Ethan Hagler. The offensive line is kind of set up well here in 2025, it would seem. Rhett Larson's versatility was big for the Bearcats last season, as the staff could lean on him to play right tackle or left guard. The Bearcats also return right guard James Don II, and both guys who cover the left tackle position, in Colt Dietrich and Luke Eckhart. But how did the offensive line look in the spring?
Yeah, so you lose Ethan Hagler, who had been here since 2020, was a staple of this offensive line at center. You also lose your backup center in Seth Colsheen. And then you lost right tackle Orion Irving, but you returned 3 starters and a couple other guys who played a pretty good amount. Also, like some of the guys you brought in the portal. But we'll start at center. From what I've seen and heard, James Don is likely to slide in from that right guard position to center. and take over there, which makes sense. He's probably your best returning guy, has played on the interior his whole career, and I think he'll be okay to make that switch to center. Left tackle, Colt Dieterich, I've heard he's taken a big step forward this summer, especially as a leader on the offensive side in his third year at Sam Houston. I think he's going to be really good at left tackle. And then at left guard, it's probably Luke Eckert or Rhett Larson. I've heard they're probably your two starting guards. Which side they go on is kind of TBD because they both played along the entire offensive line their whole career. If I had to guess, we're probably going to see Rhett Larson at right guard and Luke Eckert at left guard, just because Eckert's primarily played left tackle his whole career. I would assume you want to keep him on his left side. And so that keeps, or that the last one left is the right tackle position. A couple names to watch there. I think there's two, and they're both transfers. The first one is Kevin Kalanji, who was a backup kind of swing tackle at Maryland last year. Great size, moves really well for his size. So he could be a name to watch at right tackle. And then Quentin Williams, the tackle transfer from Louisiana, is another one to look at as well. So I think you feel pretty good. You pretty much returned four starters or four guys that played a lot for you last year. That right tackle position, I think, is the biggest question mark. But I would assume it's probably Kevin Kalanji or Quentin Williams over there at right tackle.
Is there anyone on the offensive line? You talked about the leaders, but is there, if you're picking one guy like that the offensive line looks to and says, "Hey, that guy's the leader. That's the heart of our offensive line."
Yeah.
Who is that?
I mean, I know I mentioned Colt, but this is going to be James Don's fourth year starting. I mean, he has started pretty much since the moment he got on campus, and he's just been really, really good. I mean, every year he's just been dependable there at right guard. So I think a lot of the success probably depends on him, especially if he is going to make that move to center, because you lose the guy who was your starting center for the last 5 seasons. And that's a big adjustment for the offense. So I think the success and a lot of it's going to depend on James Don, and then Colt Dieterich as well. I think he's got to make that big step. But if those two play well, this offensive line's got a real good shot to be really good this year. I mean, I like the pieces on offense, and if they can just be kind of average in Conference USA, similar to what they were last year, I think this offense has a chance to be pretty good.
If you were to pick an offensive player to have a breakout type season in 2025, who you got?
I'm going to go Michael Phoenix. I know I mentioned his development earlier. I think he's probably the guy that's going to continue to make a jump this year. I would say Elijah Green, but I mean, he's had some really big seasons at the FBS level, so he's not exactly a breakout name, even though I think he's going to be used a lot. But I think if you're looking at a guy to make a big jump for the first time in his career, it's probably Michael Phoenix. Loved what I saw from him at the end of the season. Loved his development. He has great size, moves super well for his size. So I think the breakout guy is probably going to be Michael Phoenix this year.
Well, moving over to the defense, and just like the offensive side of the ball, there's a new coach on the defensive side too. Freddie Autry-Lindsey is the new defensive coordinator. He spent the last 5 seasons as the Nichols coach at North Carolina State. And I'm curious if Coach Longo found scheming up plays against his defenses was tough at his time at UNC, that he wanted him on his staff here in 2025. But can you describe the defensive scheme that Freddie plans to run here at Sam Houston?
Yeah, so the connection there actually is Freddie was on the personnel side at Ole Miss when Longo was there. So that's how they know each other and got connected. So, and I'm sure they played each other too while he was at NC State. I'm sure that played a part in it as well. But he was actually the defensive coordinator for the NC State's bowl game. He's been the defensive coordinator at, I believe, NC Central and Campbell. And everywhere he's been and his stops as a DC, it's kind of been the 3-3-5 look, which is what Sam Houston's primarily used the last few years also. And probably the best fit for them this year, especially considering the limited depth they have at defensive line. So I think you'll see some 3-3-5. You'll see some 4-2-5 as well. I think you're a little thin at linebackers. So I think you'll see a little bit of mixed look between those two, similar to what you had last year. But yeah, 3-3-5 or the 4-2-5 is what they're going to go to. They're definitely going to have 5 DBs back there because the DB group is pretty well stocked based on what you got from the portal. So yeah, it'll be one of those two. I would probably lean towards the 4-2-5, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them go 3-3-5 also, just because you have the limited depth on the D line.
Well, let's dig into the position room and start with the guys up front along the defensive line. And this trend will continue on the defensive side, as you kind of alluded to, as the unit loses a lot of production from 2024. On this line, the biggest loss has to be first team all conference defensive end Chris Murray and his 33 pressures and a team leading 8 sacks. In fact, this unit will not have any returning starters from the 2025 season. The room returns 186 snaps from 2024 between 4 guys. This room also brought in 3 guys from the portal. Ben, I'm a little bit worried about this line heading into 2025. How did this defensive line look in the spring?
Yeah, from what I've heard, it was rough, very rough. You had 2 healthy defensive tackles that were on scholarship. You had 3 on scholarship, and 2 of them were healthy. One of them hit the portal, so you only had 2 defensive tackles returning from last year, and they were kind of your 5th, 6th guys, and Dylan Frazier and Cordell Pat. So they're your 2 returners. They're going to have to make a big jump this year and probably be expected to play a lot. On the edge, defensive line, you brought in a couple guys. I think the most notable one is probably Keelan Cox. Has bounced around a lot in his career, but at Texas Southern last year had a really nice year. I think he had double-digit sacks or was close to double-digit sacks. He's also played at Alabama. Didn't get on the field a lot, but he spent a year there. So just kind of shows the talent and ability he has. So like Keelan Cox on the edge, you also got A.J. Sargent from Tarleton, who was okay there. He can play a little inside, little outside. I think he's more of an edge guy. Zaqui Lawton is another one. He came over from West Virginia. He's an interesting one. He medically retired last season, and now he's back playing college football. So we'll see how he looks coming back. So those are your 3 portal guys. You bring back Josiah Stevens, who really flashed in camp last year as a true freshman, was just a little undersized at that time. Has gotten a little bigger now. So you've got 4 guys on the edge you can feel okay about. The big portal addition they made this spring, they made a couple, but the one that I think really stands out is probably Brian Spalding. He's a Cali JUCO guy, really flashed on tape. So I would expect probably him and Keelan Cox to maybe be the top 2 guys on the edge this year. And then another name, I know we've got him listed at linebacker, and he's always been listed at linebacker, is Jamire Diaz. He played edge at Glenville State, D2 Glenville State, and led all of D2 in TFLs. Is a little undersized. He's only 220, 230. So we'll see how it translates to this level. So you've got maybe 4 or 5 options at the edge. I think Keelan Cox is probably the one you feel best about. And then you've got to hope 2 or 3 of the others can really start to fill in. And then the last name I'll probably hit on is Darian Jackson. He goes by DJ Jackson also. Brought him in from California at Mount San Antonio College. I do like him at the defensive tackle position. So you've got DJ Jackson, Cordell Pat, and Dylan Frazier at tackle that I think you could feel okay about. None of them really stand out. But yeah, I mean, the depth is limited. A lot of unproven guys at this level. And even the guys you feel okay about, you don't necessarily know if they're going to translate to this level. So a lot of question marks on the D-line.
So there's a lot of question marks, and you talked about the 4 or 5 options there on the edge. Do you feel, as of today, better with the inside or the edge of this line heading into the season?
I would say probably the edge, just because on the interior, you also signed a guy named Shafon Boyd. He's another Cali JUCO guy, but didn't flash a ton on tape. I mean, on the interior, you've got 3 options that I think can play at this level, but none of them are elite guys that are going to make a big impact. I think on the edge, you could see where it can translate. Like Keelan Cox, you can feel good about. If A.J. Sargent could take a step up from how he played at Tarleton, I think he's got a shot to be okay. If Jamire Diaz can show that his size isn't an issue, he could be okay. If Zaqui Lawton looks good after medically retiring, he could be an option. So I think there's more upside at edge to where the defensive tackle position, you're limited on bodies, and the bodies you do have, I don't think there's a ton of upside.
So there's a lot of unknowns with this defensive line, but let's just say there's a scenario that this line just crushes it. It's great, or it's a better than okay. Who in that room is the reason why that line succeeds?
Yeah, I think it's probably Cordell Pat. He is a guy that was probably fourth, maybe fifth in your defensive tackle rotation last year, and it was a great defensive tackle room. And he flashed at times. And I think if you can get consistent, solid production out of him, you're going to feel pretty good. I think he's got the highest upside of the guys at D tackle that you feel okay about. So I think there's a scenario where the edge guys play out and are okay. I'm not as confident at D tackle, but if Cordell Pat can step up, I think the defensive line's got a shot to be better than what we think it could be.
Moving over to the linebackers, they graduate first team all conference, and the team's leading tackler with 81, Kavion Gaither, while Trey Fields is off to North Texas and Sincere Jackson is still in the portal. That trio combined for 163 tackles in 2024. This group is highlighted by the return of C.J. Johnson, who played about 22 snaps per game last season. They also bring in some transfers. What should we make of this linebacker room heading into 2025?
Yeah, and I'll make one more quick point too about Cordell Pat. He's not on the roster for some reason online, but he is still with the team, so I don't want people to get confused there. And Fernando Garza too. They both entered the portal, came back. It's whatever, but they're both still here. The linebacker group, yeah, C.J. Johnson is definitely the returner to watch. Was a special teams weapon last year. Was a JUCO All-American at Navarro Junior College and also spent a year at Memphis before coming to Sam Houston. So he's got some upside. We'll see how it translates into a starting role. He's never really started at the FBS level, but very athletic for his size, can move very well. And he's definitely a starter. The other starter in the defense for sure is Antavius Fish, who comes over from Akron, a guy that's been a 2-year starter there, has almost 200 career tackles. So they're the two guys you could feel pretty good about. Outside of them, it's a lot of young guys and a couple portal additions. Tokyo Gordon, he's a guy they just brought in about a week or two ago from California JUCOs. They also brought in Chauncey, and I always butcher his last name, but he came from Central Missouri, which is a D2 school, where he was pretty good. I think it starts with a G, and I butcher it every time, so I'm not going to try it. But you brought in a couple other pieces there. Eli Wallace is another linebacker that's in his third year now, but he's probably more of a special teams guy. So you're really going to rely a lot on C.J. Johnson and Antavius Fish, and then Chauncey and Tokyo Gordon, two of the transfers you've brought in recently. I think are probably going to be your depth pieces. But yeah, not a ton of quality depth. And Antavius Fish is your one known commodity who's shown he can play at this level. C.J. Johnson, I think, has some upside. We'll still have to see how it translates into a starting role. But yeah, I think there's some concerns at the linebacker position as well, especially if you want to go into that 3-3-5 kind of formation and throw 3 linebackers on the field. I think there's some concerns about the depth of that group. I think you're okay with the starters, but depth is just a big concern, and you've got to have depth to be able to compete at the FBS level.
So similar to Luke's question about the defensive line, if this linebacker room is successful and plays really well this season, who do you think is responsible for that?
Yeah, probably C.J. Johnson. If he can show that he can play at a high level, and they both stay healthy, I think that's the biggest thing is for this group is keeping those two healthy and having CJ develop into a quality number 2 guy. If that can happen, I think there's a chance for this group to have upside. But there's a lot of ifs to this group. So we'll see how it plays out. Those are the 2 to watch for, but a lot of it depends on CJ Johnson and how he translates to being a starter.
Well, Ben, let's keep it rolling. The defensive backfield will look totally different in 2025. Cornerbacks Jalen Jimerson, Elias Escobar graduated while the rest of the secondary hit the portal. The biggest loss has to be first-team all-conference safety Caleb Weaver, who's off to Duke. This room will be anchored by cornerback Iman Allen, who is able to rotate into the lineup here in 2024. He'll be joined by a handful of others who saw playing time in 2024. He played about 37 snaps per game last season. We also saw the staff add 6 guys in the portal. Given all the losses in this room, what should we expect from this defensive backfield in 2025?
Yeah, so I mean, the first two groups that we talked about were, I mean, I hate to be negative, but I mean, you don't feel great about. But the DB room, I think you feel okay. And this is a DB room that last year, I think this might have been the best DB group in all of G5 football. I mean, Isaiah Cash is at Virginia Tech now. Caleb Weaver is at Duke. Jalen Jimerson was your bowl game MVP and was incredible. Both of your other starting corners are at North Texas and will start there. So it's a lot to replace. So starting at corner, I think Alonzo Edwards from Texas State is the biggest name to watch. He was a starter there 2 years ago. And then they brought in some other transfers and he kind of fell out of the rotation. But from what I've heard, he is kind of the surefire number one corner for this 2025 season. The second corner is kind of up in the air. I think there's a couple names to watch for. The first one, Iman Allen, but Iman has a ton of positional versatility. He can play almost everywhere in the DB group. So he's going to be one to watch. Another one is Maurice Mathis. He's a guy that was pretty good at the JUCO level. Another Cali JUCO guy that you have coming out. So they're two to watch at the second corner position. You've got a couple other names that are coming in from the Cali JUCO ranks to watch for there, but I think Iman and Maurice are probably the number two, or the two guys to look for at the second corner position. Safety, I think you feel pretty good. I like a lot of the pieces you brought in. Cecil Powell, he was at Troy last year, played a little bit, was a starter at NC State earlier in his career, missed 2 years due to injury, but has come back and been okay at NC State and Troy. Guy that's familiar with Freddie Autry-Lindsey's system at NC State, so he's a guy to watch. Trey Harris from Cornell was really good at the FCS level. We'll see how it translates to the FBS level, but love his size, loved his film, had a lot of production at Cornell. He's one to watch. CJ Brown comes in from Bowling Green. He's one that the team got about 2 weeks ago, was an all-conference player in the MAC 2 years ago, and has been a multi-year starter at the FBS level. So feel pretty good there. You could slot Iman Allen into the nickel spot if you need to. And then you also bring back Jaden Scott, who was vying for a starting spot last year before Isaiah Cash transferred in. And he's a guy that's in his third season now that could take a jump. So I think you've got some good pieces that you feel pretty good about. I've heard they might add one more DB in the portal or from the JUCO ranks before the season starts. But I think you've got 3 or 4 quality options at cornerback, and then you've got probably 4 guys you feel really good in at the safety position.
Well, we were talking about first team all conference safety Caleb Weaver. Is there somebody in the secondary that you feel like can fill that role that is left by Caleb?
Yeah, I think there's 2 guys. Well, if you're just looking at the safety group, it's definitely going to be CJ Brown. Has played at an extremely high level at Bowling Green, has been an all-conference player in the MAC, which is a similar conference to Conference USA, had some other bigger schools after him. So if you're looking at the safety group, it's definitely going to be CJ Brown. And then if you're looking at corner, I think it's going to be Alonzo Edwards. Really liked his tape, was very productive at Texas State 2 years ago. And a funny story with Alonzo Edwards, it sounds like there's some bad blood between him and Texas State. When he committed to Sam Houston, he was actually wearing the Took Back Texas hat, and he played for Texas State in that game, which is interesting. So, yeah, I think the 2 guys that have to step up and play well, and I think they will, are probably Alonzo Edwards and CJ Brown.
All right, if you were to pick one defensive player to have a breakout type season in 2025, who would that be?
I'm going to go with Keelan Cox, a guy that has shown at the FCS level he can really play. He's bounced around some other FBS programs where he didn't play a lot, but he's going to get a lot of snaps this year. He's got to have a lot of opportunity, and I think having just so much opportunity, he's going to produce, and somebody's got to produce on that D-line. So I think if you're looking for a guy to break out this year, it's probably going to be Keelan Cox on that defensive line. And I think some of the better players are probably in the DB room, but they've shown they can play at this level. So if you're looking for a guy to break out and kind of make a name for himself, it would probably be Keelan Cox.
Well, we've talked about offense, we've talked about defense. Now let's head over to the special teams. How are those units looking, and are there any concerns?
Yeah. So kicker was a big problem last year. You had Colby Sessoms coming in, who was a first team all conference guy the year before, but he underwent hip surgery before the season and missed all year. And so Christian Pavon was your starter, and it was rough at times. I mean, it was kickoffs out of bounds, missed field goals within 30, 35 yards. But he's back, so he's in the mix for the kicking competition. A couple other names to watch. Tate Ryan is an incoming freshman you have. He's the 19th ranked kicker in the country. So you bring him in. You also bring in RJ Lopez, who has experience kicking at Nebraska and Purdue. He's another one. And then you also bring in, I'm going to butcher the last name. I'm just going to say his first name, Nico. He's another Purdue guy and he could play kicker and punter. So he's another guy possibly in the kicker mix. RJ Lopez has the most experience at this level, and he's shown he can kick at a decent level here. But I wouldn't be surprised if Tate Ryan is in the mix as well. I don't know if Christian Pavon's going to kick much this year. The fact that he was your returner and you went out and added 2-3 kickers shows that he's probably not the guy. So I would expect it to probably come down between RJ Lopez and Tate Ryan. And when the team signed RJ Lopez a couple weeks ago, Tate Ryan tweeted out that he's ready to compete for the starting job, something along those lines. So I think it's probably those two guys. He's one of the top high school kickers in the country. So it's a room where you've got to improve. And I think you will improve because there's only one way to go but up. And on RJ Lopez, he came from UCLA and Purdue. Nico came from Nebraska. And RJ kicked at UCLA, was their starting kicker for a decent amount in 2023. So he's got experience at this level. So I think it's probably him or Tate.
Now that spring practice is over, which position group or groups do you think is the most concerning heading into 2025?
Yeah, I think it's probably the defensive line is the most concerning. You've got just limited depth there, and it's just so hard to stay healthy throughout an entire year. And the guys that you do have, you don't feel great about. I mean, you've got a couple you feel good about, but not a ton. So the depth and just kind of the overall skill level of the defensive line is a concern. I think behind that, it's probably the linebacker group, but I think you feel good about your top two. The depth there just isn't great. So really the front seven of the defense, I think, is the biggest concern. And from what I've heard, the defense really struggled during the spring. And I mean, part of that is there's just so many new guys. It's a new system. But I think also part of it is there's just not the talent level that there needs to be. So we'll see how it pans out. But yeah, that's probably the biggest concern for me is that front seven.
Do they still have roster spots available where they can still add? I mean, at this point, there's not a whole lot in the portal, but do you think they'll still be looking to add guys in the portal, or you think it's just a matter of them just, getting more reps and getting the guys used to each other?
Yeah, I was talking to a staff member the other day. He said that they're probably going to add one more corner to add there. So it sounds like they've got one more spot open. They did add Cade Adams, a defensive tackle from Georgia Tech, but he was a walk-on there and didn't play and was a true freshman last year. So redshirt freshman that is a little undersized. So, I mean, you added him. It sounds like you're going to probably add one more corner DB, but for the most part, it sounds like they're probably done.
Well, Ben, in today's age of NIL, revenue sharing, and the transfer portal, how has it changed Sam Houston's recruiting philosophy? Also, realizing Phil Longo hasn't been there a super long time.
Yeah, so Sam Houston did opt into the house settlement whenever it goes live, if it ever goes live and gets approved. So there will be some sort of revenue sharing opportunities available. As far as recruiting, I think the biggest change so far is there is just not as many Texas players on this roster as there used to be. It used to be a 90% Texas roster. This year, it might be 50-50. If anything, it's going to be more guys from outside of Texas. So I think that's been the biggest change during the 6 months that Longo has been here, is you've just seen an influx of guys coming from out of state, especially in the Cali JUCOs. I feel like I mentioned them a ton during the episode, but well, it'll be interesting to see if they continue to hit those. A couple of staff members also have a lot of connections to Oklahoma, and it seems like they're recruiting Oklahoma a little harder than they typically do. They went out and got a high school defensive end from the Tulsa area. He probably won't make an impact this year, but one of the guys that they went out and signed from the high school class was from Oklahoma. So sounds like Oklahoma is more of a priority. We'll see if they continue with the Cali JUCOs going into next year. And I think the biggest shift has just been there's not nearly as many Texas guys on this roster.
So you mentioned the Cali JUCOs and the Oklahoma freshmen. Do you think that there is an opportunity with the Power Four? Kind of, they seem to be plucking guys who've played at the G5 level. Do you think that is opening the door for Sam Houston to grab higher level recruits, either like you said from Cali JUCO or like these Oklahoma freshmen that they maybe didn't have access to because the Power Fours aren't just asking like, hey, do you want to be a part of this team and be there?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple parts to that. I think the talent level that Sam Houston has access to has gone up significantly the past few years with the FBS move. I think another way that they're going to have access to more talent probably starting next year is a lot of these Power Four schools would carry 120 guys, but it sounds like they might be cut down to 105 either this year or within a year. So I think you can kind of take the last 20 guys from a school like Oregon or A&M or Oklahoma or UT or whatever, and those guys can play at this level. And so I think that's a part of it. The last part is the JUCO rule. A lot of quality kids don't get the offers they like out of high school, but they can go to JUCO and it not count as a year of eligibility, kind of boost their stock, and then move up to a school like Sam Houston. So the access to the talent pool that Sam Houston has never been greater. I mean, there's going to be a lot of opportunities a lot of G5 schools are going to have it, but there's a lot of opportunities for them to get guys that maybe they wouldn't have been able to get before that were sitting at the bottom of a Texas A&M roster or decided to go to a D2 school and take a year of eligibility instead of going JUCO. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities to go out and pull some bigger players.
Obviously, when you get a whole new staff in the off season, they're already kind of starting behind the eight ball, if you will.
Yep.
But given all that, how do you think the staff has done navigating the portal?
Yeah, offensively, I think they did great. They fit everything to their scheme and what they're trying to do. Defensively was hit or miss. I think they hit in the DB room, and you just haven't gotten what you needed to, at least from what it looks like on the defensive line and linebacker position. So it's a mixed bag. It also, another part of it too, you mentioned they're behind the eight ball. Sam Houston didn't have a head coach for 19 days. There was 19 days between when Casey Keeler left and when Phil Longo was hired. That's 19 days you missed out on players, missed out on opportunities to retain players. So not all of that is necessarily their fault for this year. The biggest concern I have is not recruiting Texas to the level that it has been before. And it almost feels like you're bringing in a group of mercenaries and you don't really know how that's going to play out. Last year in the portal, I mean, Jalen Jimerson was a Texas guy. Isaiah Cash was a Texas guy. Quincy Wright, who was your number 2 or 3 defensive tackle, was a Texas guy. Michael Phoenix was a Texas guy. Hunter Watson was a Texas guy. And it just, you have that kind of state pride that Sam Houston has always had. Don't really have that this year. We'll see if it plays into the culture, but I think that's probably my biggest concern and maybe my biggest fault from this offseason. It's hard to fault the staff this year for how things played out, considering their circumstances. I think the lack of recruiting Texas is probably my biggest thing.
Well, what do you think the main strength of this team in 2025 will be?
I think it's the skill group. You've got 4 or 5 running backs you feel good about, 6 or 7 wide receivers you feel good about. And to be able to succeed in a Phil Longo offense, you've got to have the skill set to do it. And I think they've got the chance to do it. Are they going to be able to score enough points to kind of overcome a defense that's probably going to struggle a lot? That remains to be seen. But I think this offense has a real shot to be pretty good, put up 28 to 32 points a game, somewhere around there. but yeah, that skill set, the skill group, I think is probably the biggest strength of this team.
With a lot, all the change, new coaching staff, a lot of new faces. What does success look like for the Bearcats here in 2025?
Whew. If they could hover around 5 wins, that would be, in my opinion, successful. Their over/under is set at 4.5, 5.5, which I personally think is a little high. And there's a couple factors that go into it. You play an extremely tough schedule. You travel to Hawaii, travel to Oregon State, to Texas. You don't have a home stadium. You're traveling almost 2 hours down to downtown Houston to play your home games. So you're almost playing 12 road games, and it's a completely new team. And this was going to be a year where I think it was going to be somewhat of a rebuilding year no matter what, because you lose the 11 guys from the national title team and you lose that culture. So if they could find a way to get to 5 wins, I would think that's a successful year. We'll see if they can do it. I know a lot of people have the expectation that this team is just going to pick up right where they left off last year. And I think that might be a little naive that they're going to go out and win 8 games, especially with this schedule. So if they can hover around that 5-win mark, I think it'll be a pretty good first year for Phil Longo and company.
When you're looking at their schedule, is there a particular stretch of games you feel like is kind of the most crucial for the season?
Yeah, and I would say it's Conference USA play, but for this schedule, I don't know if it is, because you go Western Kentucky week 0, a short week against UNLV, and then you're playing Hawaii. 2 very good opponents in UNLV and Western Kentucky, and then you have Hawaii, which is a tough travel. And then, I mean, you've got a bye week, then you go Texas. So can you come out of that healthy is the biggest thing. And that first 3 weeks is just going to be kind of brutal. Western Kentucky, UNLV, 2 of the top 5 G5 programs, UNLV on a short week. And then the Hawaii travel is, I mean, it's no joke. So how can you come out of the non-conference stretch, I think, is the biggest thing. Because I think pretty much all of your winnable games outside of maybe Hawaii are in conference play. So UNLV, I don't know if that's winnable. Texas, I don't know if that's winnable. Oregon State, I don't know if that's winnable. So you've got to come out of that non-conference schedule there at the beginning in healthy, good shape, ready to go for conference play. And I think your last 3 games are your most winnable. I think it's FIU, Delaware, and I'm blanking on the third one. But your last 3 games, last 3 games are the most winnable. So you've got to find a way to stay healthy throughout the year to get to those winnable games with the chance to win them.
Well, I think last year about this time, you gave us an update like, hey, we're going to have a new stadium, doing these renovations, and you just alluded to it's like, hey, it's almost like we have no home games this year. What kind of updates can you give our listeners on the stadium renovations?
Yeah, so the stadium was completely torn down pretty much right after the season. I think it started in about February, so about a month after the season ended, and it is completely gone on the home side. And so it's really just kind of the basic stands, but there's no press box, there's no concourse, any of that. And there's a $60 million renovation going on. It's going to be a 3-tiered press box with 12 suites in it, a bunch of medical facilities in there for the players, not just for football, nutritional facilities, a club level. So it's really going to be very nice and a huge upgrade over what we had before. So really looking forward to that. That'll be ready for the 2026 season. And so without having a press box, nowhere to put TV, nowhere to put coaches in a press box, we're going down to Shell Energy Stadium and right smack dab in the middle of downtown Houston. And that is where the Houston Dynamo play, the MLS team. That stadium also houses Texas Southern, the FCS football team. So they've hosted a decent amount of college football there. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting environment. Sam Houston over the last decade had always played at NRG Stadium. And those games were well attended, but it was always a big event. It was your SFA game, Texas State game, Air Force kind of thing. So I'm interested to see kind of how the crowd translates with Houston being the permanent home, not for just kind of one big notable game, but for the whole year. But Shell's a great stadium, great for college football. I think it holds about 21,000. So you're not playing in a 75,000 seat stadium that's going to look completely empty, which I think helps. So I'm interested to see how the fans show up. And logistically, I mean, it's just going to be a haul down from Huntsville to Houston it's about 90 miles, and with the traffic, that could easily turn in from an hour and a half to 2 hours. So, yeah, almost like you're playing 12 road games, but it's about as good of a venue as you can find for something temporary for a year, and I don't fault the administration for going there.
Yeah, it'll be hard to get students down there. So how does that fan base travel? I guess Keelan
Right.
Cox will have to teach everybody everything that they need to know about that
That's a
that
good point.
stadium since he came from Texas Southern.
Yeah, and that's where they play I had never thought of that, so he might have to show him the lay of the land. Another reason why he should be a breakout player, right?
That's
Yeah,
right. That's
exactly.
right. Well, Ben, we've covered a lot of ground today, but is there anything else you want to share or think that we should know about this 2025 Sam Houston Bearkats football team?
Yeah, I think we covered all of it for the most part. I'm interested to kind of see how this year plays out. Big kind of rebuilding year. I know people don't want to temper their expectations after an historic year, but I think we need to a little bit, at least for this year. But a lot of upside on the offensive side. If the defense can just be okay, I think this team's got a shot to be good. But we'll see how it plays out.
All right, Ben. Well, thank you very much for taking time out of your day to spend with us and share your knowledge. We greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. First third-time member. Let's make it 4.
That's right.
Let's do it.
Absolutely. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you're listening in podcast form, please rate and review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. Thank you all for your support. Until next time, we are the G5 Hive.